I hadn't meant for the evening to turn out the way it did. Honestly, I'd only come by to pick up something from my friend, a book he'd borrowed and promised to return weeks ago. I figured I'd swing by, grab it quickly, and be on my way. Nothing complicated. But when I knocked on the door, it wasn't my friend who answered. The door swung open, and there she was, his mother. I'd met her once or twice in passing. The kind of polite introductions where names are exchanged and forgotten just as quickly. But tonight, standing there in the warm glow of the hallway light, she didn't look like just somebody's mom. She looked striking, confident, the kind of woman who carried herself as though the world bent slightly to her presence. Her eyes landed on me first, then dipped to the nervous way I shifted my weight, and finally back up. She smiled, not polite, not casual, but amused. "Well," she said, her voice smooth, edged with a playful warmth. "You're not him," I stammered, suddenly aware of how awkward I must have looked, clutching my jacket, shifting my feet. No. I was just looking for my son," she finished for me, leaning casually against the doorframe. "He's not here." That should have been my cue to leave, to mumble an apology, turn on my heel, and wait until later. But I froze. Maybe it was the way her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulder, or the faint trace of perfume that drifted toward me on the cool air. Maybe it was just the way her eyes seemed to hold me there, steady, as if she knew exactly what I was thinking before I did. I must have hesitated too long, because she tilted her head, the corner of her mouth curving into a smirk. "Don't run," she said lightly, almost as if she were teasing a child caught in some small mischief. "You knocked on my door first." Heat flushed up my neck. She wasn't wrong. I had come here, uninvited, expecting only my friend. Yet somehow, her words made it feel like I had stumbled into something else entirely. I tried to find my voice. "Right? I can come back later, if..." But she shook her head, stepping back slightly, her hand still resting on the frame. "You might as well come in. No sense in standing out here looking like a deer in headlights." For a second, I just stood there, heart thudding faster than it should have. Stepping into your friend's house should feel ordinary. But stepping past her, into the warmth of her home, felt anything but. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I realized this wasn't going to be a quick visit. Not tonight. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt warmer, not just from the house itself, but from her presence. She closed the door behind me, the faint click making me oddly aware that I was now alone with her. My friend's house was familiar in the way all family homes are, cluttered with everyday life. But suddenly it seemed sharper, more intimate, like I was seeing it through new eyes. "Make yourself comfortable," she said casually, walking toward the kitchen. Her voice carried with the ease of someone used to being in control, yet there was something in the way she glanced back at me, a quick, almost mischievous look that unsettled me in the best way. I hovered awkwardly in the living room, shifting my weight, noticing small details I had never cared about before. The framed photos of vacations on the mantel, the neat stack of magazines by the couch, the soft throw blanket draped over the armrest. Her touch was everywhere in this house, quiet but undeniable. From the kitchen, I heard the hum of a coffee maker, the clink of mugs. A warm, rich aroma drifted through the air, mingling with something floral and subtle, her perfume. It was strangely disarming, how the two scents blended into something that felt both homely and alluring. "Coffee?" she called out. Sure," I answered, my voice sounding younger than I meant it to. She returned a moment later, holding 2 mugs. Her nails were neatly painted, her movements unhurried. When she handed me the cup, her fingers brushed mine, just for a second, but long enough to send a ripple through me. "So," she said, settling gracefully into the armchair across from me. "How's school treating you? Still keeping my son out of trouble?" Her tone was light, but her eyes lingered on me in a way that made the question feel heavier. I shrugged, gripping the mug a little tighter than necessary. "I try. Not sure how much luck I've had, though." That earned me a laugh, soft, genuine. It lit up her face in a way that caught me off guard, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. "You boys," she teased, shaking her head. "Always trouble, even when you think you're not." There was no reason for her words to stick, yet they did. The way she said boys carried a quiet weight, as though she was gently reminding me of the line between us. And yet, the way she looked at me over the rim of her cup, it didn't feel like she was drawing distance. It felt like she was testing how close I might come. I tried to keep the conversation safe, talking about classes, plans, the usual things. But beneath every exchange was a current I couldn't ignore. The way she leaned forward slightly when I spoke. The way her eyes softened when I stumbled over a word. It was just small talk, harmless, ordinary. Yet every second stretched, carrying more meaning than it should have. And the longer I sat there, the more I realized I wasn't just waiting for my friend anymore. I was waiting to see what she would do next. The coffee warmed my hands, but it did little to steady the nervous current running beneath my skin. She had this way of looking at me, not directly, not obviously, but as if she was aware of every flicker of hesitation, every unspoken thought. After a while, she rose from her chair and walked over to the shelf lining the wall. It was filled with framed photographs, little pieces of history, her son as a child, family vacations, smiling group pictures with people I didn't recognize. She lifted one frame, turning it slightly in her hand, her expression softening in a way that didn't match the teasing tone she'd carried earlier. "Funny how fast time moves," she murmured, more to herself than to me. I stood and joined her, careful to keep some distance, though my curiosity pulled me closer. She angled the photo toward me, her son at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, grinning wildly at the camera. "He was so fearless back then," she said, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. I blinked, and suddenly he's grown. And the house, quieter than I ever expected. Her arm brushed mine as she pointed to another picture, a family trip by the beach. The contact was brief, but it stole my breath all the same. My skin prickled with awareness where we touched, and though she didn't pull away immediately, neither of us acknowledged it. I forced myself to focus on the photos, though my eyes kept drifting back to her. The way her hair caught the light, the faint curve of her lips when she spoke. There was a quiet strength about her, but also something more vulnerable hidden beneath it. "You seem proud of him," I said carefully. "I am," she replied, though her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "But sometimes I wonder if I did enough, or if he even notices." Her honesty caught me off guard. Most parents I knew talked about their kids with nothing but certainty, but here she was, letting me see the hesitation behind the confidence. "You did," I said, more firmly than I expected. "He wouldn't be who he is without you." For the first time that evening, her gaze met mine and stayed there. Not a playful glance, not a fleeting look, but steady, searching, and I felt the weight of it, like she was studying me as much as she was listening. Then, without thinking, she placed the frame back on the shelf and rested her hand on the table beside us, close to mine. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The silence stretched. I should have stepped back, created space, but instead I stayed. Drawn in, restless, aware of every inch between us. It was just a simple moment, a woman sharing memories in her living room. But for me, it was the first time I realized she wasn't just my friend's mother anymore. She was someone I wanted to know, someone whose presence pulled me closer without saying a word. And that was dangerous. The photos on the shelf had given way to silence, the kind that wasn't heavy but full of things neither of us quite knew how to say. I could feel her presence beside me, close enough that the warmth of her skin seemed to hum in the space between us. She finally broke the quiet with a low sigh, returning to the kitchen table and setting her half-empty mug down. I followed, unsure if I was being invited or if I simply couldn't bring myself to leave. "Do you ever feel invisible?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft but steady. The question caught me off guard. I sat across from her, mug in hand, trying to read the meaning behind her words. "What do you mean?" I asked gently, her eyes lowered to the table, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. "People see me as a mother, or as someone's ex-wife, or as the one who hosts the holidays. Labels, roles, titles, but rarely as just me, the woman underneath it all." I didn't know what to say at first. She wasn't speaking like the confident woman who had smirked at me in the doorway. This was different, quieter, more fragile. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "I think people notice you more than you realize," I said carefully. That made her smile faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe, but being noticed isn't the same as being seen." Something in her tone stirred something in me. Maybe because I understood. "I feel that way too," I admitted, surprising myself. "Like, people don't really take me seriously. I'm just the kid, the friend, the one still figuring life out. They don't see the person I'm trying to become. Her eyes lifted to mine then, and for a long moment, neither of us looked away. It wasn't just sympathy in her gaze. It was recognition, as though she understood exactly what I meant because she'd been carrying the same weight. Without thinking, she reached across the table, her hand settling gently over mine. Her palm was warm, her touch light, but the meaning behind it anchored me more than words could. "I see you," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they hit deeper than I expected. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't trust my own voice. I let the silence stretch, letting the warmth of her hand speak for itself. Her thumb brushed lightly across my knuckles before she drew her hand back, almost reluctantly. The space she left behind felt colder instantly. "Sorry," she murmured, almost flustered for the first time that evening. "I don't usually talk like this." "You don't have to apologize," I said quickly. "I'm glad you did." Something shifted between us in that moment, a fragile thread of honesty woven quietly in the dim light of her kitchen. She wasn't just my friend's mom anymore, not to me. She was someone real, someone vulnerable, someone who had just trusted me with a piece of herself. And though I knew I should guard my own heart, I felt myself giving a piece of it to her in return. The kitchen had grown quiet after her confession, but the air between us was different now, charged, alive, as if every word had carved out space for something new. She glanced toward the clock on the wall, then back at me, her expression softening. "Well," she said, standing slowly, "if my son's taking his time, we might as well make ourselves comfortable." I followed her into the living room, where she reached for a bottle of wine and 2 glasses waiting on the sideboard. She poured with practiced ease, the deep red liquid catching the light, and then handed me a glass. "Don't look so nervous," she teased when she noticed the way I hesitated before taking it. "It's just wine. I won't tell on you." Her smirk was playful, but there was something underneath it, a testing note, as though she was gauging how far I might follow her lead. We settled onto the couch, not too close, but not far either. She tucked one leg beneath her, turning slightly in my direction, her posture relaxed in a way that made me wonder if she was more at ease with me than she expected to be. We talked about nothing and everything. She told me stories about when her son was younger, moments that made her laugh and shake her head. I shared a few of my own clumsy attempts at growing up. It was lighthearted, but threaded through with moments of silence where our eyes lingered too long. The wine warmed my chest, loosening the edges of my words, but it was her laughter that truly disarmed me. Not the polite laugh she might have given as a mother, but a softer, truer sound, the kind that came from somewhere deeper. At one point, as I reached for my glass, my fingers brushed hers on the stem. It was an accident, or at least it could have been, but neither of us moved right away. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a split second, it felt as though the entire room had gone still. Her hand was warm, delicate, but there was strength in the way she didn't flinch. My pulse quickened, the simple contact sparking a restless energy under my skin. Finally, she drew her hand back, just enough to break the touch, though her smirk returned, softer this time. "You should be careful," she murmured, taking a sip of her wine. "You're far too easy to read." I swallowed, unsure if she was teasing or warning me. Maybe both. The conversation resumed, but it was impossible to ignore what had just passed between us. Every glance, every accidental brush of movement carried a new weight. It was nothing, just wine, just talk, just the quiet company of 2 people waiting. Yet in the way her knee rested close to mine, in the warmth of her voice, in the steady pull of her eyes, I knew something was shifting. And though we hadn't crossed any lines, the edge of them had never felt closer. The wine had loosened the silence between us, but it also sharpened the tension. Every movement, every glance seemed heavier now, full of meanings left unspoken. When she rose to gather the empty glasses, I stood quickly, eager to help. "Let me," I said, though my voice came out rougher than intended. She arched an eyebrow but handed me her glass anyway, her fingers grazing mine as she let go. That brief contact left my skin tingling, though she carried on as if nothing had happened, walking into the kitchen with the calm confidence she always seemed to wear. I followed her, setting the glasses by the sink. She turned slightly, and for a moment, the narrow space between us felt impossibly small. "Thank you," she murmured, her tone softer now. No problem. I managed, though my chest felt tight. I bent down to pick up a fork that had slipped from the counter, and at the same time, she crouched too. Our faces came startlingly close. Close enough that I could see the faint flecks of gold in her eyes. Close enough that the warmth of her breath brushed across my cheek. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Her lips curved into a subtle, knowing smirk. "Careful," she whispered, her voice low and playful, but with an edge that sent a shiver down my spine. "You might get caught like that." She didn't move away. My pulse hammered in my ears. Every instinct told me to retreat, to laugh it off, to remind myself she was my friend's mom, a line I had no business approaching. But her gaze held mine, steady, teasing, daring. When I finally straightened, she did too, and in that motion, her hand brushed against my wrist. Only this time, it wasn't accidental. Her touch lingered, her fingers tracing lightly across my skin before pulling back. A small gesture, simple and fleeting, yet it carried all the weight of something we had both been avoiding. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "You're really good at making me nervous," I admitted, trying to cover the intensity of the moment with half a smile. Her laugh was quiet, but genuine. "Good," she said, tilting her head ever so slightly. "That means you're paying attention." The room seemed smaller, the air warmer. She turned back toward the counter, casually stacking dishes as though nothing had happened. But the smirk remained on her lips, and the ghost of her touch remained on my skin. I stood there, caught between wanting to step closer and knowing I shouldn't. Something had shifted. The playful teasing from earlier had transformed into something unmistakable. A line had been crossed, not with words, not with promises, but with a single deliberate touch and the silence that followed. And as I watched her move through the kitchen, graceful and unhurried, I realized the question was no longer if we would cross further, but when. The dishes were stacked, the wine glasses rinsed, but the moment in the kitchen lingered between us like a secret neither of us could name. I could still feel the echo of her touch against my wrist, faint but burning, the kind of warmth that refused to fade. She glanced at me then, as if sensing the storm I was carrying inside. Instead of teasing or pulling away, she surprised me by nodding toward the back door. "Come on," she said gently. "It's cooler outside." I followed her onto the porch, the night air washing over us in a rush of calm relief. The sky stretched wide and dark, scattered with faint stars, and the quiet hum of crickets filled the silence that words couldn't. She lowered herself onto the wooden step, her posture unguarded, her shoulders softening in the dim glow of the porch light. I sat beside her, careful at first to leave a small gap, though it felt like the distance itself was louder than anything we might have said. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air was cooler now, but the warmth of the wine, the closeness of her earlier touch, and the quiet gravity of her presence kept my chest tight. Finally, she let out a soft breath, almost like a laugh. "You're quieter than I expected," she said, tilting her head slightly to look at me. I shrugged, my hands resting loosely on my knees. "I'm just trying not to ruin this moment." Her smile faltered, replaced by something softer, something that looked dangerously like tenderness. "You couldn't," she murmured. And then, almost without thinking, she let her hand drift toward mine. Her fingers brushed against the back of my hand, light as a feather at first, testing, uncertain. When I didn't move away, when I, in fact, turned my hand over and let her palm settle into mine, she exhaled slowly, as though she had been holding her breath for far too long. We sat like that, our hands folded together between us, silent but steady. Her thumb traced an absent circle against my skin, a small, intimate gesture that spoke louder than any words could have. "I shouldn't," she whispered, her voice catching in the still night. "Maybe not," I admitted, though my grip on her hand tightened just slightly. "But I don't want to let go." Her smirk returned then, softened into something that wasn't teasing but tender, almost wistful. She leaned back, her shoulder brushing mine, and for the first time that night, the silence between us felt safe, not charged. There were no grand declarations, no reckless promises. Just two people sitting side by side on a quiet porch, sharing the kind of closeness that didn't need to be explained. As the crickets sang and the night wrapped itself around us, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, quiet, fragile, but real. And all I could think about was how it had started with a knock on her door and her smirk when she told me not to run.